This is an example of a poster we're going to build in InDesign. It's going to teach us some placing of objects, rotating, resizing, working with different lettings within the same text block, importing a color, and much, much more. First of all, if we were going to really do this project from scratch, what we'd probably start off with doing is working with some kind of a grid like this. This may seem pretty messy right now, but most designs are really done on a 12-column grid or a 6-column grid. I highly suggest you read the book, Making and Breaking the Grid. It's a pretty good starting point. Grids allow you to have some kind of basis or a comfort zone for where things probably would end up aligning. Of course, most of the time when we're working, we're really in this mode right here where we've turned the guides off, and that way we use these things only when we actually need them. We're not going to make something on a page that's got as many messy grids as this. We're going to just start off with something very, very simple. To get started though, the first thing we need to do is to install a font. So from this document folder, if you just double click on the typeface device regular and hit the install button on a Mac, it'll take a few seconds, but eventually you're going to get to this box and it's going to install the font. And then it may end up popping up an error message, especially when you're adding fonts from kind of an unreliable source. All you'd have to do if you get this error message is just check this little box and then just click install checked, and you should be good to go with that. So to get started, we're going to go up and we're going to make a new document. So file new. We're going to go ahead and make it for print. We're going to turn the facing pages button off. More than likely our rulers are asking for a picas dimension, but just to make you feel more comfortable, we're going to enter 11 IN with no space in between that for inches, and then 17 IN for the height. So that's going to build a document 66 picas wide by 102 picas tall. Our margins, let's go ahead and enter 0p42, hit the tab button. If this lock button is on, it's going to go ahead and fill that number in for all the other quadrants as well. And it really comes out to be 3.5 picas or 3p6. So let's click OK. First thing we want to end up doing is let's go ahead and create two guidelines. One that's going to be kind of a vertical center and one that's going to be a horizontal center. To make a vertical guideline that would run like along here, we go over to this vertical ruler, we push and hold, pull over onto the page. Up in the top left corner, right up in here, it should be showing the dimensions of where you're pulling the thing over to. Half of 66 would be 33 picas, so I'll let it go right there when that number says 33p. I hit Command 0 occasionally, which just takes me back to my home and recenters the page in this fit-in window view. To make the horizontal one, I'm going to push and hold and pull down. Should be able to pull down to, I believe, 51 picas, so that is like our true center of the page. Next thing we're going to do is we're going to make a rectangle. I can go either use the rectangle frame tool or the rectangle tool. If you know the dimensions that you want this thing to be, there's multiple ways to draw a rectangle. I could just draw and let go at whatever dimension I want. Just keep in mind that the rectangle or the rectangle frame tool is only for creating a new box. So if you don't like the size, don't try to grab one of the dots with this tool and start to draw again, because it's just going to make you a new box. Instead, go get the select tool, the selection tool, the black arrow tool, and you can grab this point and you can move it around if that was not the shape of your intended rectangle. On the other hand, if you already know the size that you want it to be, in our case 11 by 17, I can just come somewhere up in here and just click once, and it's going to pop in a box that's going to allow us to type in exact dimensions. So I'm going to type in 11IN, tab 17IN. And then at that point I'm going to come over here. More than likely this thing was already closed. I've hit the swatch button. There are two different objects up in here, and if you hover on one for a while, it's going to tell you that this one is the stroke and this one is the fill. I want to set the stroke for none, but the fill for black. And then I can come back up here and I can grab and drag up to the top left corner, hopefully until I get both of these to say 0. That's the exact top left corner. And then if I needed to again, I could retype in 66 picas by 102 picas. For some reason the thing had changed, but that'll exactly center the box on the page. Probably one of the next things I want to do though is go to Object and go to Lock. This will keep the black in the background, and it's not going to allow it to ever come to the foreground and cover up anything else that we're going to end up doing. Next step is I'm going to go place my hearts. File, Place. Navigate to the folder where the pieces are. I'm going to place this heart AI. One thing I want to be careful of doing is if I click somewhere here right in the middle of this box, it may want to actually attach the black rectangle with the heart. So I'm just going to place it over here for a second. As long as it's off to the side of the page, it's going to know what I'm doing. Now I've gone ahead and I've placed this heart in at an angle just to give you something to work on. So I'm going to come up in here, click on it with the black arrow tool or the selection tool, highlight this number besides this rotation thing, and I'm going to type in -45 and return, and that's going to center the heart. There's actually two ways to do this. This is nice, and it was very simple. The only problem is that my bounding box is this diamond shaped thing, and sometimes that can cause problems. So I'm going to go up here while it's selected and go copy, and then I'm going to go paste. I'm going to have a second one. The first one I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to rotate -45 degrees. The other one I'm going to click on with the black arrow tool, but then I'm going to go get the white arrow or the direct select tool. Click on the heart, and I'm going to type -45 degrees. What that does is it changes the center of the object. It leaves the bounding box of the object the same, it just changes the guts. And then when I have that tool on top of my box, I can push and hold, and I can drag this thing up so I can see most of the heart. And then I'm going to go back and get the the selection tool or the black arrow, click on the heart, grab this bottom dot on the edge of the thing, and I'm going to draw it so that I've got just enough room for the heart. That was several extra steps, but sometimes you want this bounding box to be perfectly centered on the page without it being in this diamond shape. Next thing I'm going to do for both of these is I'm going to change the dimensions to 200%. That's this box right up in here. If this lock button is on, the minute I type 200 here and hit tab, it's going to change that dimension to also be the same as the first one. So it's going to resize it proportionally. For some reason this button was off and I typed in 200 and tab, it's just going to change one dimension, the width of it, which in that case I'd have to type in 200 on that one. For this one I'm going to do the same thing, but I'm going to make sure that box is the little chain link is clicked, and I'm going to type in 200% and scale it up like this. The placement of these two hearts for this one, I'm going to move it up with the black arrow tool. I'm going to place it so the top of the heart is sitting on our margin up here, this pink line that is 42 points from the top of the page. And then I'm just going to use the arrow keys to tap it over to the left, or the right actually, so that this is lining up right with the edge of the page. So the center of the heart should be on the right edge of the page. The top should be right up here against this line. If I think I'm off by a little bit, I can tap the arrow key. Kind of the same thing with this one. I'm going to move it over to get it a lot closer, and then I'm going to just tap with these arrow keys. The bottom of the heart will sit exactly on the edge of the box, and I'm going to slide it over. And if that's moving too slow, I can move it quickly by just grabbing it with the arrow tool, and then I can refine the selection by tapping these arrow keys. So this should be sitting right on the bottom of the page and the very tip of it. If at any point this looks odd, I'm going to hit Command 0 to recenter it on the page. Because the hearts are hanging off the page, just keep in mind, a lot of times when we work, we want to hit the W key. Now the only thing I have to be careful of when I'm doing that is I need to make sure that I'm not in a text block or it'll actually type the letter W. But if I type that without anything else going on, it's going to hide and only show what would actually be printing on the page. So we can work like this for a little bit. Next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to add the Romeo and Juliet type. So to do that, I'm going to turn this back on. I'm going to go ahead and start a text box, the text tool. I'm going to put the left edge right up against that purple margin, and I'm going to draw all the way over to this purple margin. I'm going to make the box pretty big. I'm going to let go. I've got this tiny cursor blinking right now. I'm going to go ahead and change the typeface to the typeface device. Once it starts to fill in, I can either click on it or I could have hit the return button. Other thing I'm going to do is I know this needs to be a lot bigger, so I'm just going to type in 72 and hit return before I even start typing. And I'm going to type Romeo. Romeo, return, and return Juliet. And then I'm going to hit Command A to highlight all the text in that box while the text box is still selected. If my swatches palette is collapsed, I can go over here and click it to open, or if it was still open, I want to make sure that the stroke is on none, but the fill is on paper. And then once that I've done that, I'm going to come up in here to the alignment options, and it's already saying that it's on align left, I'm going to click the align center. And then I could, if I didn't already have an idea of what this was going to look like beforehand, I could just play by holding down the command and the shift button and then hitting the period or the greater than symbol to walk up the size of the type. But in this case, I'm already giving you a head start. This typeface is 210 points tall on 180 points leading. Except there's a trick, or a catch to this, and that is that I don't think I want the ampersand sign to be the same as Romeo and Juliet. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come back and highlight just the ampersand, and I'm going to add 100 points to it. So the ampersand is actually 310 points tall. Problem with this is that, as you can see, I'm going to hit the W to turn those guides off, is that because we have mixed typeface sizes in this text block, it didn't know what to do with the leading, or it's still hanging onto the 180 point above this thing. So my ampersand is actually overlapping. There's a lot of different ways that I could do this, but rather than doing a lot of math, what I'm going to do is I'm going to get a rectangle box. This is a common thing people end up doing. I'm going to try to draw a little rectangle starting at the bottom of the ampersand, and I'm going to draw it down until it gets to the top of the L and the I. And then I'm going to click to fill it with yellow. And then while that box is still selected, if I hit Command 1, I actually zoom into actual size, or Command 2, and I'll zoom into 200%. Then I'm going to just stare at this thing, and I'm going to grab like this top dot at midnight, 3 o'clock, 6, 9 o'clock. I'm going to grab the 6 o'clock dot, and I'm going to let it go so it's sitting right on top of those letters. And I'm going to grab the top dot, or the midnight dot, and I'm going to pull it down and let it go right there. So that box should be pretty much that exact same space that is between the bottom of our ampersand and the top of our third line of type, the word Juliet. And then I'm going to hit Command 0 to get back to this view. While that thing is selected, I'm going to go up to Edit, Copy, and then I'm going to go up to Edit, pull down to Paste, and I'm going to get a second yellow box. I'm going to drag that up and drop it kind of underneath where the M is. And then I'm going to go ahead and get the text tool. I'm going to triple click on the line with the ampersand so that it highlights the ampersand and the space that often appears after it. And then to change leading on the keyboard, rather than moving these numbers around, I'm going to hold the itty bitty Option button down, not the command, and I'm going to start tapping the down arrow. And by doing that, it's going to move it down in increments of 2. When I think I'm pretty close to that, I'm going to go back and get the black arrow tool, and I'm going to hit Command 2 to zoom in. And I'm going to, one more time, move this yellow box between the ampersand and the word Juliet, scroll down with my arrow key, and I'm not quite there yet, so I'm going to triple click on the ampersand. And then again, I'm going to, a couple more times, hit the down arrow key. One more time, I'm going to come back up in here, click on the yellow. Almost, but not quite. And down one more time. And I think, based on doing this, we should find that this thing should be about 244 points for that leading. Go back to Command 0. I can move this yellow box just to verify that it hasn't moved. But now that I've used these kind of optical spacers to adjust the leading, I'm going to go ahead and click on one and delete it, and click on the other and delete it. Now, one of the things I probably want to do is I want to make sure that the Romeo and Juliet type is centered vertically. I've already taken care of centering it horizontally by drawing the text box all the way from that margin to this margin, and by using the alignment command, which again I can find up here. To end up doing this, I'm going to click off the text, so I'm not selected on anything with the black arrow. I'm hitting the W. I'm going to click on the Romeo and Juliet text box, and I'm going to try to center based on this midline that I drew myself so that it's right about there on the ampersand. If I was really worried about this, which let's just say for this assignment we are, one more time I'm going to get a rectangle tool. I'm going to draw a rectangle from the top of the word Romeo to the top of the page, fill it with yellow or some other color from my color palette, click on it, edit, copy, edit, paste. I'm going to drag this one and set it on the very bottom of the page. And then I can sit here and stare at it and say, yes, I have vertically centered, which is sometimes also called floating that text. So now, or if I was off, I could click on the text block and I could tap my up and down arrow keys. I'm going to delete that. Now I'm going to go get ready for the rest of the text on the page. So to do that, I'm going to go File, Place. Again, I'm going to hit Cancel here. I need to make sure that nothing is selected, so I'm clicking off on this blank space. Otherwise, the Place command often wants to replace the object that is selected. So I'm going to go File, Place. And then from there, I'm going to navigate in that folder to the Romeo Juliet instructions. I'm going to drag it into a text box that's way off to the side of the page here. I'm going to hit Command 2. Command 1, which really should zoom me into that part of the page. I am going to take the text tool and I'm going to highlight this, the Royal Shakespeare Company Presents. And I'm going to hit the shortcut for copy, so Command C. And I'm going to also note that it's 22 on 24. And I'm also going to look that everything else on this particular document is Myriad Pro bold or regular. I'm going to hit Command 0 to zoom back out to here. I'm going to draw a text box just somewhere up in here. And I'm going to hit Edit Paste to dump that copy in. I'm going to hit Command A to select all. I'm going to move on over to here and I'm going to just click Paper for right now. And then I'm going to go ahead while it's still selected and I'm going to highlight the typeface and I'm going to start to type Myriad Pro bold and then hit return. I already said it was 22 on 24, so I'll do that and hit return. And then I'm going to hit Command 2 to zoom in on it. I believe the way this was laid out, the words "the Royal" was on one line. I'm going to insert a hard return in front of the word Shakespeare, in front of the word company, and in front of the word presents. I'm also going to go ahead and select all, and I'm going to change the automatic kind of built-in kerning on this thing from metrics to optical because it's big enough. Ooched a couple of the letters closer together and probably fixed most of my kerning problems by doing that. I'm going to go back and click on the black arrow tool, Command 0. And then what I'm going to do is I need to steal the red color from the heart so that it matches up to be the same. I need to check the alignment on this thing as well too. So I'm going to go over here to down toward the bottom. There is a set of tools that if you hover on, or if your tool is set up like this, it might be on one of these other options, but it looks like an eyedropper with a bunch of squares by it. It's the color theme tool. It's probably the easiest way. What I need to do is I need to find I need to hover with this on top of a red object. I need to be careful. Technically I'm over the heart, but if you'll notice it's selecting the text block, so it would be sampling the white color there. So I need to find part of a heart where there's nothing else that's overlapping it, and I'm going to click. And as soon as I've done that, I'm going to go back and click on this thing. One more time the tool, and it's going to pop up and say, I sampled this color. I'm going to grab this color, push and hold on it, and I'm going to drag it over, and let it go in the swatch palette. So it's saying this color is a combination of 12% cyan, 97% magenta, 98 yellow, and 3% black. Great. If I want to get rid of this tool, all I have to do is hit the escape key on my keyboard. It should disappear. Okay, well, I'll just leave it for now. Now I'm going to go ahead and get the text tool and I'm going to click on this text block, Command A to select all. I'm going to make sure that the fill color is selected and I'm going to click on the red and then I'm going to move this on down a little bit. And then as long as I'm making text, before I refine that, I'm going to go ahead and click Command 1 on this to zoom in and I'm going to highlight this Twilight Theater all the way down to the end of the box office number. I'm also going to note that it says 20 on 24, but the subhead gets a bump to 30 point, add 6 point between the subhead and the body. Okay, so I'm going to copy that. I'm going to draw myself another text block somewhere down in here. Just a second ago when I was trying to draw a text block, right here it actually was grabbing on to the end of the Juliet box because I was dragging over the top of it. And so the cursor was starting to blink. It didn't realize I didn't want to be in that text block. So all I have to do is start to draw a text block like off the side of the page and draw it from like the bottom right corner rather than top left. Let go, paste, which is Command V, Command A to select all. Make sure that the fill is on, change this to paper. One more time, this is Myriad Pro, let's say regular. This is, I believe it was 20 on 24. And then as long as I'm here, I'm going to go ahead and triple click on that top line to grab that particular linotype, the Twilight Theater, and realize that, oops, somebody made a mistake. The Twilight's all capped, but the word theater isn't. So I'm going to come up to this thing right here and change it. After I hover for a second, it should show me that that is all cap. I'm going to go ahead and change this then from regular to bold. I'm also going to ignore the instructions and bump it up to 30 instead of just 6. So it should be that big. The only other thing I need to do on this text is, because I've changed and this top line is bigger than the rest of these, it might still be a little bit tight. So this is just getting you used to where some of the paragraph functions are. I'm going to go back and reselect that linotype. I'm going to come up here to my top palette and I'm going to change it from the A to the paragraph. And then I'm going to look at these little guys. And I'm going to look for the one here that is showing the bottom. It's got this arrow pointing at the bottom, space after. And I'm going to go ahead and just insert 0p6 is I believe what I asked you to insert. 6 points. And hit return, and you'll notice that the text below that line pops down just a little bit. So I've given myself a little bit of extra space above that. Where does this thing go? Well, 0 to recenter. I'm going to grab the text block with the black arrow tool. I'm going to move it down. I'm going to set it so that the text, the baseline of this bottom line of text is sitting on top of the margin. And then rather than aligning it to the center, I already have this kind of natural kind of vertical stroke with the I in Juliet. So I'm going to grab this guideline that I drew that was originally to check the centering, but I no longer need it. And I'm going to drag it over so that it's right here on the left edge of the eye. So I'm not moving it very far. And then I'm going to click on this and zoom in. And I'm going to move down a little bit. Yep, my line appears to be pretty much right on top of the left edge of the eye. And I'm going to click on the text block and just using the arrow keys, again, I'm going to set the text block so it's sitting on the baseline of the margin, right here, and so that the left edge is lined up underneath that line. So I'm breaking the grid by, instead of using the exact center of the page, I'm using the vertical stroke as kind of a line to push us on down to that. Only thing left I have to do is just finally adjust this just a little bit. So I'm going to go ahead and click on Romeo and Juliet. Command 2 to zoom in to double the size. I'm going to draw another rectangle here at the bottom just to capture what that space is. Fill it with yellow. And then I'm going to look at it to see how tall it is. It's saying that the height of that box is 3p14. Well, so that's basically 3 picas and 1.4 points. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to double this to 6 picas and perhaps this number to 3. Hit the return button. I'm then going to move this box up so that it's above the Romeo and Juliet. So trying to use something that's kind of proportional. I'm going to set this so that it's right on top of the word Romeo, and you can decide whether to put it on top of the O in Romeo or the R. This typeface doesn't have a consistent cap line. Then I'm going to click on the Royal Shakespeare, and I'm going to tap it up so that the word presents. The baseline of that block is sitting on top of there. So in a way, I'm using double the space that my leading is on the headline in order to still keep some kind of relationship between this block and this block that's similar, and yet I don't want it to be so tight as to only be that one spacer wide. Command 0, click on the box and get rid of it. If I wanted to, I could click W one more time to turn the guides back on. I could draw a vertical guideline over here and try to drop it on the left edge of the R in Romeo, and then use that to slightly align that text a little bit. But if I hit W one more time, I should be done with what I was trying to do on this. If that's the case, what I need to do is go up to File, pull down to Save As. I'm going to give this document a name, and I'm going to call it Romeo _ and then I'm going to put my name, and then I'm going to click Save. The great thing about InDesign is that document is very small, it's easy to email, it's actually easy to open on a web server in multiple locations. InDesign documents do allow you to do that. Multiple people can be working on the document at one time. Illustrator and Photoshop files don't work that way. That's why it's used so heavily in magazine publishing between different locations and things. But I do have to remember that that heart was an object I place. I need to hang on to that, or at a later date I might be missing that. So here's a couple things I'm going to do. In addition to saving the design document, that means that if I send it to somebody, everybody has to have the exact same typefaces that you do. Maybe your client doesn't. So I'm going to go up to File and I'm going to pull down to Export. And I'm going to go ahead and make sure that this is saying an Adobe PDF for print and leave it as Romeo Curtis. It's going to add the .pdf on the end of it rather than the .INDD, which is what my InDesign file was called. And I'm going to hit Save. I'm just going to leave this as high quality print as the standard and not worry about any of these other checkboxes. Click Export. I'll go up to File, I'll pull down to Export again. This time I'm going to change the format from a PDF. I'm going to change it to a JPEG. Again, just leave the name the same. It's now going to add an extension of .jpg on the end. Hit Save. I'm going to go ahead and say maximum quality, 72 dpi, sounds good. Hit Export. And then I'm going to do one more thing. I'm going to go up to File and I'm going to pull down to Package. What this function is it'll make a folder with all of the contents of this document in it. Because sometimes I might want to keep on working on it at a later date. The InDesign file. It's going to also keep a copy of the heart for me. And it's also going to include whatever fonts were used in this document. So the device font, Myriad Pro Bold, Myriad Pro Regular, and I'm just going to click Package. And then here I can type a fancy note if I want to, or just hit Continue. And then at this point I'm just going to leave all these checked, and I'm going to hit Package. And when that's done, I'm going to close this window up, and I'm going to go look on my desktop, and now I've got several different things. One, I've got the JPEG. So if I wanted to email that to somebody or post that to a website, there it is. If I wanted to send probably a slightly higher quality PDF, there it is. It's already set to go. And then when I made the package folder, the Romeo Curtis folder, I've got this folder that already has, it made a copy of the fonts that were used in it. It's got a copy of the links, which is the heart thing. It has another copy of the InDesign document, and it also has a copy of the PDF. But at this point with this thing, I could click on it and then on a Mac, go File, Compress. It makes a zip folder of it. It's really easy to email to somebody. And you also don't have to worry if your mail server doesn't understand attachments like .INDD or if it doesn't understand the font. So at this point, you hang on to the InDesign document and the package folder, or the zipped package folder, or email it back to yourself. And then you're ready to go ahead and turn in the PDF and the JPEG into the Dropbox just so that I can check things out. So that's how simple this thing was. Probably took longer to walk through and explain it than it is to actually do the document.